It's an honor and pleasure to be part of the Texas Family Leadership Council chairs. My name is Kevin Hattery. I'm with Boys and Girls Club of Greater Houston, and so we work closely with the all the chairs. So thanks for the chairs that are involved today for joining as well, and the entire Children at Risk and Texas Family Leadership Council team. Um, the agenda has been forwarded through. We have a really good lineup today. We even have a first-time presenter, the Permian Basin ECE, is going to be presenting as well. So we look forward to that. What we do want to start with is one, a reminder that I want to put out there is just about with respect to membership, and Marisol will describe more of that, but remember to be sharing that information with others, as well as turning your own membership dues in. And then Marisol, I know that you indicated that you had a few items you wanted to cover, and thank you for allowing me to be the facilitator today.
Thank you, Kevin, and we really appreciate the work that you do with TXFLC as a leadership advisory member, but also as a chair for our meetings. It's very valued and we appreciate it. But just very quick with TXFLC, the membership and partner membership, I've had so much great feedback on emails with questions, and I'm happy to answer any of them or set up a time to meet with you and others at your organization that want to learn more. But what I wanted to talk about, I dropped a few things in the chat about some upcoming events that are part of Texas FLC, including the upcoming Equity Summit, which Ashley will be talking about a little bit this morning, along with some other projects. These learning events are at no cost. You do have to register online so that we can keep track. But please join us that day on the 22nd of February at 10 a.m. for a couple of hours. Share with your partners, with your community, with your region. We'd love to have you. Then we do have an upcoming event with Family Service, and Mary's on the call on February 23rd, the Future of San Antonio. That is an in-person event that will be at UTSA. We'd love to see some of you there if you're in that area. And then the other benefit is a partner. And I do have a couple of folks that sent in some surveys. The Immunization Project, the Houston Food Bank had some fact sheets of a program they're running that I will be sharing with all of you here in the chat box, but also in the meeting minutes and agendas. So it's just a way to get your programs out to more people, especially surveys and documents that you're hoping to get from other partners. But the email sign up is in there. I am going to be reaching out to some lapsed partners just to reconnect and meet with any new individuals at your organization. But thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Marisol, for kicking us off with that valuable information. And again, I think many questions in the chat box, but Marisol, we've had a chance to talk numerous times, and she'll make sure she's taking care of all of us. So appreciate that. And let's start with the first topic we have on the agenda today is to receive an update from the Texas Racial Equity Collaborative, also known as TREC. So Ashley Watts is here to share that update with us.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be joining you. My name is Ashley, and I'm a fellow here at Children at Risk. A lot of my work has been in early learning and out of school time. My most recent role, I ran some 21st century programs, which I now pursue as a scholar. And so all of that has positioned me to harness collaborations to incite meaningful change for our communities who are often marginalized by racial disparities. So our collaborative TREC, the Texas Racial Equity Collaborative, has done some really great work, including the 2023 State of Equity Report. We had a rally day at the state capitol, and we had the passing of the Crown Act, to name a few items. TREC is now gearing up to host the Equity Summit, which will be held on February 22nd from 10 to noon. And our summit will have experts from across the fields of education, health, research, and justice. We anticipate a robust conversation that not only highlights disparities, but provides some insights into some promising practices, as we will have practitioners and some researchers. In March, we're going to be kicking off with our Texas Equity Tour, which will have a 4-stop convening full of roundtables, press conferences, and great fellowship amongst of the organizations and members. We will be stopping in Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, Houston, and in El Paso. Following those stops, we will have a one-pager that will be released and disseminated for policy consumption with the underlying goal of addressing racial equities and providing some recommendations. We convene every fourth Monday of the month at 4 p.m. and we encourage dialogue of pressing concerns amongst our regions and our areas of expertise, as well as lend ourselves as thought leaders and doers in the work of equity. In our past meeting, we had a guest speaker. We were privileged to have a guest speaker from Chicago's Erickson Institute, which is a prominent early learning educator preparation program. And she joined us to highlight some disparities within early learning. And really, we aim to continue this work and pour into, one another as we pour into our communities. So thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you, Ashley. And just can you give us an idea of the key priority? Where can we lean in and support you? What do you want us to really focus on this year, if there's one or two things to point out?
I really would like to continue getting the word out to organizations. I know there's a myriad of, different organizations across our state. And so just bringing that awareness key to what we do. I would really like to see that expand. I currently just identified an area for a sub-work group within the Texas Racial Equity Collaborative. And we are going to convene and gather so that we can really promote community advocacy in those 4 different stops. We don't want to just, show up at those stops and present. We want it to be more of an amplified, cohesive voice. And so just bringing that awareness to those different regions, I think that's viable and imperative in the work that we do to move forward.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. And I think a good way to look at this is there's the Equity Summit that's taking place on February the 22nd, not too far away. That'll give everybody a really good idea of what's happening on a quarterly basis. So for everybody on the call, remember that is quarterly. The summit's coming up. Push it out there. Make people aware of those who are interested in this space. So Ashley, thanks again for joining us and sharing that update. Now we want to pivot over to hear more about another one of the work groups that we have, which is a public policy and advocacy work group. And Mandy Kimball is going to talk about that. That was, I think we had one last week, I think. So
we did. Good morning, everyone. The policy work group met last week, had some great conversations. I throw it out there. If you are interested in joining the policy work group, let me or Marisol know. We really meet more ad hoc than a scheduled every Tuesday meeting, and I can get into that, just be considerate of people's schedules. But what we discussed was interim charges. Y'all have heard before that Children at Risk has submitted interim charges that we've shared, but we have some great key partners that have submitted as well. And so really combining that list of interim charges that can be presented representing the whole child and the various services and needs that they have. So once that is completely compiled, we can share it out with the larger group, but it's going to be a really good list. We also discussed some federal funding challenges. As y'all know, Congress is trying to pass a budget, and some of our partners are highlighting some key issues. So, for example, and Marisol, I think Catherine had sent a one-pager, right, that we could put in there. But WIC, for example, currently is the House budget cuts $185 to the WIC program, which we all know is so extremely important to our children and families. And that would mean that it's $800 million short of fully funding it. So it's already not fully funded. They're cutting another 185. So really important that we lift our voices to advocate for that. And then also for some key food programs. The Texas Emergency Food Assistance Program and the Commodity Supplemental Food Program, which is really vital to food banks trying to get that food out to families. And so there's a one-pager with policy recommendations and more information. Doesn't take a lot of effort, but if you want to share with your network and or contact your congressman, that would be fantastic. So our next steps are for the work group is to regroup in March. We're thinking that people have already submitted interim charges or suggestions to the House. We're still waiting on the Senate. That should be any day. But we're thinking that interim charges will be assigned probably in March, late March. That's our guess. And just a reminder to everyone, interim charges are issues or topics that the governor, lieutenant governor, speaker assign committees to study. And so that gives us a lot of opportunity to be able to advocate for the issues, tell the stories, and make sure that legislators understand what the needs are and what the policy recommendations are for next session. So we are going to continuously be talking about interim charges and hearings once they start rolling. Also, we had talked about, and Wendy from Texas Immunization Partnership, they have come and talked, Tip has come and talked to this group quite a bit about immunizations, and they are doing a immunization policy engagement survey. So we wanted to share this with folks. It doesn't take long. If you could fill it out to just help them gather the data and information that they need and that children and families need to ensure that they are safe and healthy. Jason, I know you're coming. Do you have, because I know you work closely with that as well. Do you have anything else to add about that survey? Because there's a couple more things I want to talk about.
No, I don't, but just it is important that people who do care about immunizations participate in that, because we're trying to get as much information from the ground up as we can to inform the policies that we're going to be promoting at the Capitol going into the next session.
Okay, great. And then we also wanted to share, which some of y'all may or may not have seen before, just a kind of legislative timeline about how it works every 2 years, and just some of the steps that are taken between now and next session. And basically what you would see on this is right now we're in that interim charges phase. The legislature is running a little bit late, but now is the time to really be identifying those issues, because in the summer is when we really want to be finalizing those policy recommendations. And then oftentimes we will put pen to paper and help draft that legislation and find champions, late summer in the fall. So that is the process. And so if you, which y'all are experts, if y'all are experiencing problems, issues, if there's administrative roadblocks that are impeding your ability to be able to provide services to the children and families, or if there are particular programs that are extremely underfunded or they have been cut, if you could relay that to us so we can really understand the issues and help develop policy recommendations. Again, many of you are the ones that are on the ground and are seeing this day to day. And oftentimes policymakers are disconnected. They think everything is fine, but how can we lift your voices and your family's voices to ensure that we have positive, strong public policy? And then last thing I wanted to talk about is yesterday, there was a webinar, and Kim Coffrin, I don't know if you're on or not. There was a webinar, y'all heard a lot about Prop 2 that passed in November. And now cities and counties can implement the child tax or property tax exemption. And so there was a webinar yesterday that talked about how it started, but really presented the nuts and bolts of implementation. And so Kim hosted a webinar and we released the website with a toolkit for childcare providers, schools, advocates, and also for cities and counties to really be able to look at and know some of the deadlines, timelines, and next steps to be able to get the tax exemptions to those childcare providers. Kim, is there anything that you would add? Marisol, did you drop that? Is that I'm not looking.
Yeah, Marisol, thank you for dropping the website into the chat. So there's a great toolkit. There are sample op-eds, there are sample social media, emails to your officials. If it's not on there yet, it will be, but the link to the webinar will be on there so you can watch it. We had a council member, Alter, from the city of Austin join us, as well as a child care provider from Aransas County. Both of those communities have passed the ordinance already. So it was a great example of rural as well as a metropolitan area passing the legislation. So onward and upward as we continue to hit all 254 counties.
There you go. Let's do it. So that's kind of my recap. I hope I didn't ramble on too much.
No, not at all, Mandy. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the conversation about the interim charges. I think that's important for all of us to realize. And I did try to click on the link for the timeline. It didn't work, but maybe it's just me and myself. We'll just double check that because I think it's some really important people
Yes,
understand
I'll
that
fix it.
and fall through on that. So thanks for bringing that up. And the other thing I would say there too is just sometimes it's just as important as we're lifting our voices and sharing out what legislators should be focused on. It's also being at the table so that a legislator doesn't do something that inadvertently that actually hurts what we're doing as well. So you got to kind of be on alert for that as well. And we've had our own experience, and Mandy and Jason has called and said, "Hey, can you make sure these guys are on task here?" So it really helps them enormously, and we have the opportunity to shape what our public policy and looks like in the state of Texas. The other thing, and don't forget, thank you for dropping in the immunization partnership survey as well. So we're still staying with Mandy, and we're going to Jason, and I know I hope to hear it's this at least a reminder, Jason, about when to vote coming up. I think that's in March, right? So I hope you get that in your comments.
Well, Mandy, can I jump in? Go ahead. Yeah. So first off, Kevin, thanks for making me feel incredibly underdressed. And secondly, as Kevin said, March 5th is the primary. And as people have heard me say ad nauseum, as long as we've been doing the Family Leadership Council in Texas, because of redistricting, gerrymandering, however you want to think of it, the primary election is in many cases the de facto general election. And there are more contested primaries this year than maybe ever, right? So we do know that the primary is where the action is right now. And even within the primaries, there's just so much energy. I mean, you've got like J.C. Datan in Houston, who has the governor campaigning for him based upon his voucher vote, and the attorney general campaigning against him in the Republican primary based upon his impeachment vote. So the whole thing has been thrown into the blender. And all of this to say that March 5th primary, that de facto general election for a lot of these state legislative races, I bet a lot of people don't know that in 4 days, happy February, in 4 days, voter registration ends for the primary. In 19 days, early voting begins. So one of the reasons we see so little turnover and so few incumbents getting beat in these legislative races in the primaries is because the timeline is so compressed, right? The legislature just adjourned for all practical purposes like a month and a half ago, and now they're already ramping up for these primary elections, and that not a lot of time for people to campaign over the holidays and whatnot. So the general kind of consensus at the Capitol is that there's probably not going to be a lot of turnover in the primaries. A lot of incumbents aren't going to lose, is the general thinking, right? Which is kind of the norm. And that's particularly good for Speaker Dave Thielen because they're coming after basically his lieutenants. We saw yesterday that that Donald Trump endorsed one of Thielen's primary opponents in his Republican primary in Beaumont, probably because of the fact that Ken Paxton, a close Trump ally, is still steamed about the fact that the House voted to impeach, which was obviously the doing of the Speaker of the House. So we're seeing it's going to be a really interesting, contentious couple of weeks in particularly Republican politics. So I would say, though, that if you're interested in the voting side of things, don't delay if you're not registered, or don't delay if you want to encourage other people to vote. Remember, Texas has an open primary system, meaning that anyone can vote in the Democratic primary or the Republican primary. So just because you might not traditionally vote one way or the other in November, that doesn't mean that you can't participate in one of the party's primaries in the spring. So now, if we could fast forward a little bit to what's the date? November 5th is the general election, I think. That means, and what I'm hearing right now, kind of I had a Democratic staffer ask me a question the other day, which kind of took me aback, to be honest, which was, what are you going to do in the event of a Republican supermajority in the legislature? Because apparently there's a little bit of like a hum beginning now that this could be a wave election of sorts, right? Where we see potentially Donald Trump really driving turnout and potentially Republicans actually overperforming in the districts that have been drawn for them and potentially knocking off some Democrats. That's a pretty ambitious concern, or maybe an overblown concern from this was a Democratic office that I was in. But it is interesting to note that people are beginning to war game out what would happen in the event that there is a supermajority. I've been doing this for 25 years, and in those 25 years, there has been one session where one party or the other had a supermajority. And people will remember that session as the session when about $6 billion was cut from public schools, which was considered a success because the original proposal was to cut $11-12 billion, right? So be prepared, because if there is a supermajority, folks who were around last session, remember that Prop 2 that Mandy just mentioned, that's a constitutional amendment. That requires a supermajority to get on the ballot, which required Democrats and Republicans to work together to get the number of votes necessary to get there. Because if you couldn't otherwise get a supermajority previously. However, if one party does have that supermajority, they could conceivably run the whole session and have multiple constitutional amendments pass out of the legislature, which would in turn go on to the ballot the following November. And the issue there being this last year, there were 14 amendments on the ballot. Only one of them went down. Constitutional amendments almost always pass. So in the event that one party or the other, in this case, the Republicans do have a supermajority, the potential for a really profound constitutional rewrite is very much there. Another thing to keep in mind right now is what's happening on the border. A lot of people are paying attention to what's happening in Eagle Pass. A lot of people here in my world kind of assuming that it is yet another part of the governor's auditioning to become the vice presidential candidate for the Republicans in November, which would cause obviously a considerable scramble here. People like, John Cornyn John Cornyn has already endorsed Donald Trump. There's an article, I think, I can't remember if it's the Washington Post. I think it's the Washington Post this morning, kind of analyzing that endorsement, basically saying, okay, is John Cornyn positioning himself for a position in the Biden administration? In the Trump administration, should he be reelected? And all of this, a lot of people are beginning to speculate based upon a couple of votes that he's taken, bills that he sponsored related to guns, that Cornyn probably wasn't going to be running for reelection anyway. And the general consensus is that either through election or through, if he were appointed and the seat were to become open, that Ken Paxton is probably going to be the person who will be best positioned to run for that Cornyn seat. So just kind of keep an eye on that as well, because I think that it's ultimately going to have a huge impact on how our work plays out going into and during next session. Sorry, that felt a little long-winded, Kevin and Mandy.
No, that's great. I think the summary there, everything is unprecedented right now. Maybe an overused word, but it's all unprecedented right now.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we're not seceding from the union yet, though, right?
No, I
Any
mean,
conversations or
in fact, we took a step away from secession, because if you vote in the primaries, you know that both of the parties have completely non-binding things that they put on the primary ballot that basically are like, do you like puppies? Vote yes or no. There was going to be a Republican primary ballot question about secession. No joke. And I think that a lot of people began to kind of think through what that would actually mean and how that might play out. And we're like, no, this is not a good idea. So that will not, there's a strong effort to put that. There's a lot of people who are really mad that it's not going to be on the ballot. But we're hearing from Permian Basin later. I mean, I live in Jeff Davis County part-time, and you see a lot of Texas signs in that part of the world. So that's a real thing out there.
Yeah, understood. Well, it's again, it's a point in time, and really in our own era, and so always going to be interesting for a while. So thanks again for sharing all that. And Mandy, was there anything else you wanted to add on the advocacy update for today?
Thank you.
As well? So just to kind of circle back there, just a reminder for everybody to get out and vote. I think that would be the call to action here for our membership, is to remember to do that, encourage others to do the same, and exercise that right that we have. Thanks again, Jason and Mandy, for the advocacy update, as well as the work group updates as well. So let's turn our attention to a mental health update that's going to be provided by Kenesha Protho with the Mental Health of America of Greater Houston. So Kenesha, again, I apologize if I'm not saying your name correctly there, but
No, you got it. You got it perfectly. Thank
okay.
you.
Yeah.
Would it be okay for me to share my screen?
Please.
Okay. I'll get that pulled up. Thank you guys for allowing me to present. Hopefully everyone can see my slide. Not sure what's going on. There we are. All righty. So Mental Health America, again, good morning, everyone. My name is Kenesha Protho. I am one of the professional development specialists for the Center for School Behavioral Health with Mental Health America of Greater Houston, where Dr. Jamie Freeney is our director. And I'm going to be presenting really quickly, really briefly on a report that was released by our national office of Mental Health America of Greater Houston. And so they released a report detailing the state of mental health in America. And so as you can see, there's a few questions, that they had in mind as they were, getting this report together, trying to figure out, how many, adults have mental health issues, substance abuse issues, and not just adults, but also youth. And so really the purpose of this report was to provide a snapshot of mental health status among youth and adults for policy and programming, analysis and evaluation. We also had in mind to track changes in the prevalence of mental health issues, as well as access to mental health care, to understand how changes in national data reflect the impact of legislation and policies, as well as to increase the dialogue with and improve outcomes for individuals as well as families with individual needs. And so throughout this snapshot, if you will, of this report, you'll hear me talk about rankings. And so the rankings explore which states are more effective at addressing issues that are related to mental health as well as substance abuse issues. And so across our nation, these were the variables that were taken into account, again, when it came to putting this report together. Let you guys see that here. And I'll also drop a link as well to the report in the chat once we're done. And so here were the key takeaways. So in the US, there are 350 individuals for every one mental health provider. 60% of youth with major depression do not receive mental health treatment. 1 in 10 youth with private insurance do not have coverage for mental health or emotional difficulties, which equates to about over 1.2 million youth. 16% of youth report suffering from at least one major depressive episode within the past year, and more than 2.7 million youth are experiencing severe major depression. And so here at the Center for School Behavioral Health, we typically focus on behavioral health outcomes for youth. And so that's why you'll hear that focus on youth. But again, the report does detail for adults as well. And so here are the youth variables that I wanted to pull out. And I'll also show you guys some graphs as well. So it's measuring youth with at least one major depressive episode within the past year. How many youth are dealing with the substance use disorder, youth who have severe major depression, youth with severe major depression who did not receive mental health services, youth who receive some consistent treatment, youth who have private insurance, but the insurance did not cover mental health or emotional problems, and students, which was also an interesting variable to me, students who identify with emotional disturbance for a individualized education program. And that is something that we'll also get into here. And so here you'll see this graph again, where it's detailing the ranking. So unfortunately, as you can see, according to this data, Texas is number 46 out of 51 states as it relates to those variables that I discussed. And so unfortunately, that means that in our situation with Texas being 46 out of 51 states, it indicates that youth have a higher prevalence in our state of mental illness. And with that, there are lower rates of access to care. What we're also seeing is that there is a provider shortage. And I know that you guys, maybe it's been reported on here before, but I know that you guys have heard this before, that we are suffering from a provider shortage. And that's just not, in our state, but that is across the nation, it seems like, unfortunately. And so in terms of mental health workforce availability, and when we say like mental health provider, like particularly that includes psychiatrists, psychologists, licensed clinical social workers, counselors, marriage and family therapists, and advanced practice nurses who specialize in mental health care. And so here, Texas is ranked 50 out of 51. And so that means here that we have 760 providers on average to one person. And so one thing that I wanted to back up here, my apologies, when I mentioned like the key variables and we were talking about like, students who are youth who have been diagnosed with a emotional disturbance, that is key because that is something that is occurring in the school setting. And so again, at the Center for School Behavioral Health, we work a lot with schools, campuses and school districts, as well as other organizations who serve youth in some type of capacity. And so that means that in order for them to have that diagnosis of emotional disturbance, that means that they have been diagnosed or they have been assessed by a licensed school psychologist within their respective district or campus. And there was nothing cognitively going on there as to why it would explain their behavior. There was no intellectual disability. They were able to read and comprehend, and maybe in some instances probably have decent or pretty good grades. But there's this explosiveness when it comes to their emotions and their behavior, unfortunately. And so with those particular students that have that diagnosis, a lot of times they are being disciplined at a higher rate than their peers who do not have that emotional disturbance diagnosis. And with that diagnosis, they are typically receiving services through the school, through an IEP or an individualized education plan. And so again, given those variables, it's unfortunate, And it's, when I was, going over the report, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's kind of depressing, to really hear that in terms of our state, like how we're doing, as it relates to other states in our country, unfortunately. But I will say that when also going through this report, I thought about like what can we do, because I think, every year there's always, data that comes out and mentions, where we are, in terms of mental health and providers and how many people are suffering from, different diagnoses and how many do not receive care for, and there may be a wide variety of reasons, as to why people aren't receiving care, whether they have insurance or not. But I thought about it, I did some research. I'm thinking, like what can be done, because I don't want to just report on something that seems, a little daunting. But in some of the research that I provided, it was mentioned that reimbursement rates for insurance tends to be, unfortunately, on the lower end. And so maybe that could explain, like, as to why some providers maybe, don't accept insurance for one, because again, the rate is so low. And then, again, if for some reason a family doesn't have access to that, now they're, trying to, pay out of pocket, and that could be an astronomical cost for them, unfortunately. So I don't know, how many of you guys present here have, the ability or resources, to maybe grants or something of that nature to provide, additional, reimbursement rates, or maybe advocating to get, reimbursement or insurance rates higher. That might be helpful in terms of, getting people seen who need to be seen, as well as potentially maybe removing the cost barriers. So I do know that there are different potential providers, I'll say, that are not tapped into the mental health workforce. Reason being, and I'll use licensed master social workers and LPCAs, for example, that they are licensed to provide mental health services, but sometimes there's that barrier there for them in terms of the cost of supervision. And so these particular licensees are able to provide mental health services, but again, it has to be through supervision. And sometimes that's a barrier because they, again, may not have the resources to be able to pay for that. And because that is something that generally is, again, untapped, that is something that maybe, we could look into, if you have the ability to do that, within your respective agencies, to maybe hire LMSWs or LPCAs in order to, again, try to increase or try to get more providers out there to maybe combat the provider shortage that we're seeing. So I know that was pretty quick. I didn't want to go over the 10 minutes, but we also have Mental Health America also provides free mental health screenings as well for anyone who might need them. And if anyone would like to get in contact with us, that is our contact information. And as I mentioned, I'm going to also put the link to that report in the chat so that everyone has access to it.
Keisha, I think it's a great reminder that there's already partners out there like Mental Health of America and others in our respective communities. We don't have to recreate the wheel in order to help solve a problem. When you're looking at a ratio of 760 to 1, there are resources available, and each of our respective organizations can identify opportunities. Our organization itself, we know that this is very important as well, and something we hadn't done in the past, and we just don't do the referral anymore. We identify grants that will support it, and then we bring in the partners. And so we don't have to hire anybody, but we're able to make some inroads in these important areas. I am curious, in your report there, you were talking about the different variables and youth specifically that had been diagnosed with depression, and one of the variables you referenced was youth with substance abuse. Did any of your report talk about the impact of social media at all, or have you stepped into that space?
That is a good question. And so I did not see the impact of social media in the report. However, I will say in my role, like we do a lot of training with schools and school districts and other organizations that serve youth. And that is coming up a lot, mainly because they're kids, right? They don't always know when to, detach, when it's too much. And just being honest, sometimes adults don't know either, so we're giving, kids these phones or tablets or, different devices where they have, access to the world in a way, at their fingertips. And sometimes, absolutely, yes, it can, I do believe and I do agree that it can contribute to some mental health, concerns for our youth. And one thing that we also know too, like, working so closely with the schools, these things don't shut off. Like schools are trying to, get to the point where they're like, hey, if you have your phone, you can't have it with you, during class, don't have it on. What they're seeing is that even things that occur or happen on social media typically also carry out like in the school day, right? If someone said something to someone on social media, they're going to school trying to look for them. Sometimes, a lot of kids will believe the things they see, online. They take it at face value, unfortunately. And a lot of times too, youth who are particularly vulnerable tend to also put their vulnerabilities, unfortunately, on social media. And so I do agree that it can absolutely impact their mental health, especially if they're not able to see it and be able to talk about their feelings, to someone that can actually help them, debrief what's going on.
Certainly everything that you've said here today is valuable for our group. And if there's any point in time that you or Jamie identify or see some other research around that topic, I think that would be good for this group to hear and learn more about, and how we can mitigate some of that even in our own respective organizations and support efforts around that. So if you guys find anything, please let us know.
Will do.
About that.
Will do.
We're going to keep moving forward here, and at the top of the agenda, I'd mentioned this, that we have a organization first time presenting us, the Permian Basin ECE, and so Shelby Smith has joined us today. So thank you, Shelby, for being here.
Thank you for having me. Is it okay if I share my screen?
You sure can. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Let's see. Can you guys see that? I will get it to PowerPoint.
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. All right. Well, like you said, my name is Shelby Smith, and it's good to see some familiar faces. Kim and Jacob and Mandy, and then of course Mary Saul. But my name is Shelby Smith, and I serve as the Early Childhood Action Network Coordinator for the Education Partnership of the Permian Basin. And so I'm going to start with just giving you a little bit of information about our organization, and then move into some work specifically around early childhood and what's going on in the Permian Basin. So with that, well, there we go. All right, so just a little bit about the Education Partnership of the Permian Basin. We serve as a nonprofit with the collective impact model. So very much a backbone or intermediary, sorry. And so our mission is to help improve educational outcomes from cradle to career. And our vision for the community is the Permian Basin is a community where students love to learn, teachers love to teach, and people love to live. So you can see our vision and mission and values there. So like I said, from cradle to career, so at both ends of that spectrum. So my work specifically is in the birth to 5 space, so the cradle part. And then we also have a few initiatives around the career and post-secondary areas. So I will go into our geographical focus. The Permian Basin is a unique asset to the state of Texas. And so we actually serve, we have partnerships with our workforce board, as well as our region center and the Permian Strategic Partnership. And so we serve all of the counties that are listed in the green and yellow. And then that orange, you will also see that we do serve into southeastern New Mexico. So we serve 3 counties, Eddy, Lee, and Chavez County, as our organization. We serve them. We have lots of things happening in that part of the Permian Basin that we're excited about. And so I will share more on that as we go. But we do serve a very big area around the Permian Basin, obviously Midland and Odessa, kind of the urban core. but there are other communities, more of a rural area. So we have 2 action networks. We have the Early Childhood Action Network, and then we have our Grow Our Own Action Network. So ECAN obviously is more of the early childhood, birth to 5, and our Grow Our Own is looking at post-secondary and high school. So within our Grow Our Own Action Network right now, we are currently working on creating an energy pathway that has been piloted in 4 districts, 2 in Texas, 2 in New Mexico, that started in January. They piloted the first semester of it, or they're started to. So we're very excited about that. And then in August, we launched what we call the Permian Basin Innovation Zone, which is a partnership between 4 districts, Buena Vista, McCamey, Crane, and oh my goodness, I just went blank on the 4th. Rankin, I'm sorry. And they all partner, no, Grand Falls Royalty, I'm sorry. They all partner together and share different pathways, sharing students. So say welding is offered at Crane, McCamey students can go to Crane and receive the welding classes and then be bused back. So creating more opportunities for those students. So lots of initiatives happening that way that we're very excited about. So I will move in to more about the ECAN and those updates, because that is why I'm here today. So this is our strategic plan, our 5-year strategic plan, and kind of where our focus lies. So really kindergarten readiness, quality of childcare seats, the quantity of childcare seats, parents who understand developmental milestones, the percent of parents who read, sing, and play with their kids, participating in reading programs, referral to childcare services. So this is our what we work off, and so all families can afford and have access to early childhood education that ensures kindergarten readiness. And then parents and other guardians have the knowledge they need to support their children's learning and development. So here's some more of our strategic priorities, and then I will kind of go into what this looks like. What does this look like on the ground and where we are headed? So we have what is called the Early Childhood Action Network that is led by a group of co-chairs. We have representatives from when it was thought of every aspect of birth to 5. So we have a doctor with, you'll see all the logos down at the bottom of the organizations that they represent. So we have an MD from Steward Medical Group. We have the child care specialists from the Workforce Board, First 5 of the Permian Basin. We have both early childhood directors from Midland and Odessa, our region center, and then the Literacy Coalition of the Permian Basin is another nonprofit backbone organization, and they took over an initiative that we started called the Power Bags. It was the power of words and early literacy, and they took that over. And so it is important for us to be together in our work, and it very much coincides with each other. So that is who leads our meetings. And then the intention of ECAN is to bring professionals from the birth to 5 space to discuss needs and identify solutions in early childhood education access, quality, and kindergarten readiness. And so we have these meetings bi-monthly where we bring these groups together. We very much provide, we like to provide a time to network because we always have new people attending, but then we also share updates, and then we like to highlight a community resource that we have in the community. And then within that, we also have started child care coalitions. So currently we have them in Midland and Ector County. And these child care coalitions are held in partnership with the district, and them taking the perspective of these students are not in our seats yet, but someday they will be. And so starting to invest in them. The intention is to create a partnership between the local child care centers and the school districts, and allow other community resources for more opportunities of professional development, collaboration, and resources to be shared. So this has been a very cool experience. So when I first started, it was very much, why would we want to be in competition, or why would we want to be in company with our competition? Like we're just straight and narrow. I don't want to see what they're doing. I don't want to talk to them. And we've seen the walls come down, and the collaboration of these organizations has been so cool. And the child care centers have opened their doors for us to go, other child care centers to come and tour. The school district has opened up seats to professional development that they're offering to their teachers, so our child care workers can go and receive that professional development at no cost to the child care centers. And so it's been very cool to see. So we have those in both Midland and Odessa, and those meetings are held monthly. And then the last thing that I have is we completed in 2022, September 2022, we completed the Permian Basin Child Care Landscape Analysis. And so we have really been working on getting this data and information out to our community. We don't want this to just be a bunch of data that sits on a bookshelf. We want action to come from it. And so in October, we hosted a childcare convening with all of the different communities that were represented in the landscape analysis to kind of start that conversation and disseminate that data. So we actually had Mandy was able to come and present about Prop 2. And so it was a great event and started that conversation, but we are very much into the next aspect of that. And so we will be hosting another event in March around the landscape geared more towards businesses. So the first event was geared towards the community, elected officials in those areas and things like that. So we are gearing this one towards businesses and business owners. And so we are very excited for that and what it looks like for our community. We are very much kind of in a figuring out what works best for our community and what serves, what we're figuring out the messy middle currently and how that works. So we're excited about everything that's happening here. And my next slide, I do have our website and then our email. So if you guys ever want to reach out or need anything, please let me know.
Thank you, Shelby. Kevin did have to hop off, so I'm going to close out the call, but the information is wonderful, and thank you for joining us, Shelby. Your organization has done a lot in the Permian Basin. From your work that you've been doing with other organizations similar to yours across the state, what is it that the Education Partnership of the Permian Basin is doing that is making it stand out and work for this particular region?
Well, I think we have a lot of different things going on. I think that our childcare landscape like that, the data that we have, a lot of communities don't currently have that as, a useful tool. But then also the other initiatives, I mean, the energy pathway that's being piloted is nothing like it has been done in the state. But we're also doing it across 2 states. We're crossing state lines with the work that we're doing. In New Mexico, we are later this month, we will be standing up an ECAN for Southeastern New Mexico and starting that there, and a child care coalition for those 3 counties. So I think there's just a lot going on that makes it different.
No, there is, and I'm in the Permian Basin, and that I've seen the growth that we've seen in ECE work, and I've seen with the oil and gas that's in the Permian Basin and those industries, there's a lot of economic growth that is being looked at with the programming. So I think it's very interesting. And the PSP that you mentioned is a very interesting model too that others might not know about, but that we can save that for another meeting. But the Permian Strategic Partnership is oil companies here in the Permian Basin that come together and make change and in education and other items that are needed. So they've been a strong force for the organization and others. Well, thank you, Shelby. I don't think we have any other questions for you.
Thank you for having me.
Actually, Marisol, I was waiting for Jason, but I think he popped out. And I'm gonna get the percentage wrong, but you guys also passed Prop 2 with flying colors. Like your voter, when you look at the votes per county, like it was really exciting to see this, and that goes to not only it was a no-brainer to vote for, but also your work on the ground and really talking about childcare. So good things are happening out there.
Yes, we are very excited, and I'm so excited. The webinar yesterday was great, and I'm excited to take that and put it into action and get it passed here. So these counties can reap those benefits. Or our child care centers can reap those benefits. But Kim, thank you for everything that you guys do. We appreciate great partnership.
Right back at you.
Yes, and I believe the Permian Basin had the largest attendance last year with the Texas tour stop that Kim Coffin and her team did on information about Proposition 2, daycare deserts, and Middle Odessa had the highest attendance, right? Because Shelby and the ECAN group do such a wonderful job of making sure everyone knows about it. So we really appreciate you, Shelby, out here in the Permian Basin.
Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Again, apologies that Kevin had to hop off. He wasn't feeling great today. But thank you everyone. We will see you all in 2 weeks. And if you know of any topics or discussions, or if you want to hear more about what we talked about today, let me know and send me speakers, data, research that you want to dive into a little bit more. We'd be happy to. But thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and we'll talk soon. Bye.